Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on fitting up the radiator, or the first part of the fitment. I'll show you what I got. So the inlet and outlet is absolutely opposite of what it would be on the factory 4-liter radiator. So input to the water pump over here needs to go here, outlet here, but the 4-liter is the exact opposite. It picks up here, returns up there. Wrong sides. Plus it takes up the full width between, pretty much the full width between here and here, and there's no room in front of the grill. So where are we going to put the intercooler? So I got on the internet for quite some time and found this on Summit. Very thick, 2-core, single pass. It can become more than a single pass if need be, but I don't think it will. It's pretty thick. This slides down right here between the steering box and the frame rail with a little bit of room to spare. So that allows us plenty of room for pipes to go around and several inches to get an intercooler in front of the radiator. So I think it's going to work out just fine. I believe this is the same size as that guy. Figuring out hoses will be different. I think this is maybe 1/8 of an inch bigger than that guy, but that's not a big deal. We got a welder. So I've already made a lower mount for it to sit in the grommets of the factory radiator. Wouldn't have to do that, but that's what I wanted to do. I want it to reach all the way over there and be easily removable. I'll get some 3/8 inch aluminum rods and weld in there too. I thought about using bolts, but I'd rather just sit and float. But we got to get everything I made fitted up and welded together and tacked to the radiator so we can fit it. So then we can put in the upper core support piece so we can see how we're going to trap the top of it. So this should hold the weight, and then we just got to balance it up here. But I made all this stuff on SolidWorks. So this guy will sit across there, and then I've got, let's see, this is this side support. It will bolt through there, or the rod will go through there, through there, through the hole. This will weld to the tank. And this one here, this guy, that kind of curly cues over, reaches all the way over from here and comes up to support it. I think that's going to be enough. We'll find out, but let me get this unboxed and we'll kind of mock it up. Now I kind of guessed when I made the model, because I didn't have the radiator yet, so we'll see how close I got. Looks like I did miss by just a little bit. This weld will be nice up to here. We don't need to weld this side, it'll be alright, but it's just on the edge of that, so we won't weld here. But we can go all the way around and we can fill in this hole if we want to. But that goes through, supports this side with that piece, this side supported, and then this guy will float in right there. I think that will hold everything. So I'm going to kind of eyeball measure, and then I'm going to tack all the lower bit together, and then I think I'll just measure and tack it to the radiator, and we'll just set it in, see what happens. tape measure. We're on the lip, so it's probably 1 3/8. It's probably actually something metric. And this guy is 1.5 inches. So there's still a size difference. It's probably not enough to really matter. We could probably still slide the whatever fits the 1 3/8 will probably slide over the 1.5 inches. But in the end, I have a welder. We can do whatever we need to do. This side, the jump is, I think, 1/8 of an inch. Inch and 9/16. Yeah, 1 3/4. So much bigger change on that side, but we'll cut this and weld another tube in, use that as a bushing. Whatever we do, we'll try to do it as clean as possible. I'm pretty proud of my bracket. I think it looks pretty good. Finally got me a new lead coming for the welder, because I've been taping it up because it leaks, because I went way past the duty cycle way too many times. We're having a little problem with the intake and exhaust, but that's going to be for another video. So for now, I'm just going to get back to getting this thing mounted. So bottom mount done. I need to make this fit, which right now it does not. We're hitting here. You can see where they had cut out for that other radiator. I made sure the cap was at the same height. So I'm going to cut this guy out for now, and it's going to end up landing on those ribs. So we'll end up trimming this too. It's not really holding anything anymore, so it doesn't matter. And eventually I'll go to the junkyard and get another one that's not already been cut up and try to do the best job I can at it. But we got to make it fit without touching anything, so then we can figure out how we're going to mount the top to keep it from flopping around. I don't think it's going to be too bad, but that's what we got to do. So let's get to cutting. Well, that last clip was made several weeks ago. The radiator's been sitting in there in some of my other videos, but some things have changed since the initial radiator placement. One of the update videos, I moved the engine forward. There was a lot of reasons to do that, and I believe it was the right choice. There's way more room for activity back there. There's more room here to get a downpipe. The forward-facing intake manifold, that was a big deal. I would have had to notch the hell out of the firewall. And here I still have to, you still got to bash it. You still got to make some room. But it fits with some clearance. Obviously this is very different than the 4.0. Part of the problem when I measure the bell housings, the AW4 4-liter bell housing is 1 inch taller than the 2JZ bell housing. So the bell housing itself shoves the back of the engine closer to the firewall than the 4-liter was by 1 inch. So we need that inch back. But then the forward face, so the inch back would be great. It'd help the GE intake manifold clear a lot better, but it does not fix the forward facing manifold. We could modify lots of stuff. There's lots of ways to do lots of things. I'd rather, if I'm gonna, it was $550 for that intake. You can find them cheaper, but not by much. I don't want to buy that to cut it up, and I don't want to design mounts that make you have to cut up your intake. I mean, you do have to bash your firewall, so that to each their own. I'd rather bash the firewall. I do not care. I'd rather not cut up the manifold. So, engine forward, good. I had a turbo manifold from Amazon. It's the same one they sell on eBay. It's the one with the divided T4 flange. It had the turbo sitting back here, and everything was really tight right here. The back of the turbo was pretty much right here, right on top of all this stuff. I don't plan on getting rid of the AC. Not that I can't move or make some custom parts, but I don't want to. But there was no gap. The way the manifold had to sweep out and in, because of the flange was closer to the center of the engine, everything was tight right here. There was no room for a downpipe. You could make it, you could get through there. Not saying you can't. Obviously there's another one, there's another 2J, XJ. I don't know if they mess with the firewall there or not, but I want a 3.5 inch, maybe a 4 inch downpipe. Do I need it? No. 3.5 is the minimum though. If I'm going to build it, I'm building it once. So, That helped with that, but it caused a problem up here. Our gap here is insufficient. A low profile fan from Spall, the 16-inch, will fit. It's 2 1/16 inches, 2 1/16 tall. Well, I've pretty much got 2 1/16, maybe 2 1/4 right there to that pulley. Not a huge fan of putting the fans, I'm not a huge fan of putting the fan directly on the radiator. I'd rather have a shroud. If you add the rubber seal they have, their insulator, which also helps it keep from just vibrating around and wearing out the radiator. I don't like hanging them from those zip tie things. If you buy that, that adds, it was a 1/4 inch to 5/16. Well, now we're into the pulleys, so that doesn't work. This one, there's enough room to make it. This one over here, we got a problem. The angle of the dangle here and the gap. I could make this work. This is slightly bigger than this, so I could cut and make and weld whatever we need to make this. I don't like how close that is. This is mounted on poly, and this is going to be floating in its factory rubber pieces, so everything can give a little, but that gap's awfully short. I'd rather have a little more room. And there's not too big of a problem moving it. My plan right now was that the rubber pieces the factory one set on, I was going to drill this 1.5 inches forward, re-drill the holes, and then notch this out. Move the whole radiator forward 1.5 inches. And we've got the room, we can do that. Right now this cap sits just under this guy. So if it was just a hair forward, we'd be right in this gap, it'd be perfect. But I was against it because I was being a bit of a size queen. I wanted to get as big of an intercooler as I could. I wanted a 4-inch one just because it was cool. Right now I've got a 5-inch gap from here to here. So we go forward 1.5 inches. Well, I've got 3.5. I want to put a condenser, or the option to put a condenser back in later. I've been looking at some DIY condensers, well, not DIY, just universal condensers, and I found one that'll fit. But I need the air gap, we need some space. So we're gonna have to drop down to a 3-inch intercooler, which is fine. There was no need for a 4-inch. There's no need for a giant downpipe, but I want it as best as possible while we're building it for the first time. So I'm gonna cut that. We're gonna re-drill the holes. I'm gonna re-drill the holes first, then I'm gonna cut that, move the radiator forward 1.5 inches. That'll help with that being tight. That'll give us plenty of room to have a shroud. The other problem with that fan, it's low profile, but it's not a high performance fan. The CFM is not that high. If you go to a 16-inch, one of their performance, a Spall high performance fan, or even a regular fan that's not low profile, the CFM is through the roof. It's almost double, or at least 1,000 CFM more. So I don't think it'll be a problem, but we're gonna want that real estate if we need it. So let's get to marking this thing, drill it, and get it moved forward. There's our cut. This is a little close to the edge, but it'll be fine. This thing had been mangled at some point, so I had to straighten out this edge just a bit. But that scoots us forward. I was able to crowd that edge, which is why it's thin. The way it had that bevel, I didn't want to sit there and try to flatten that out or mess with it, so just cut it off. If it needs support, I'll weld something to it. But crowding this edge, I was able to keep it at 1 3/8 forward instead of 1.5 inches, which is very small, but it's something. So let's set this thing in here again, and then we're going to start figuring out how big a hole this needs. Eventually I got to get a new one because they had already cut that for the other radiator that was in it for the 4-liter. So we'll get it set in. I'll mark this, just get this roughly chopped out. I'm probably just going to square cut it because it's going to get replaced anyway. On that one we'll make a nice cutout. Maybe even reinforce it. Maybe. Probably not. But let's get to it. Pretty much where I already marked it for the last one, just further back. That clears everything now. Yes. So now we're tucked up under here a little better. I wonder which one of these is more crooked. That bracket mangled on the bottom or this piece up top. Anyway, we got more room now. So now we can have our shroud. We got, get you that there. Three 3 5/8. And up here at the top we've got 3 5/8. So now we have just a little more room. So a 3-inch intercooler will be butted right up against that, and then still have an air gap for a condenser later on if need be. But that'll work. Now I've got to figure out how to hold the top in right. Well, let me think about it, figure out what we're going to do. Well, found it. The reason this doesn't look straight is because this side's okay, and this side has seen some damage at some point. When it's pushed in over here. So this is sitting just a hair different. I guess that's what you get on these older things. They've seen some abuse. Think. I'm wondering if, like the factory rubber piece, not for the 4.0, this one didn't have it on it. It was, well, the radiator's way over there. It just had those bolts jammed down into it, which was not awesome. That was not right. It was just going to bust a hole in it eventually. But to retain it from here and allow it to float so it's not trying to destroy itself, as the chassis flexes and the engine vibrates, we need to let it just kind of float around in there. So I'm wondering if something factory, that piece of rubber that sits in here with a stud on it, so you just line it up, drop this on, and then that traps it. We don't want it to be rigid. Well, that's as far as I've made it with the radiator to this point. I've still got to figure out how to trap the top, but I think the intercooler is going to kind of be integrated in with it, and if I get the condenser to put all three of those things together and make it all fit in that space all at one time before I make something to retain it at the top, because it may become a little more apparent of how to do it, or if I put all the work in now, it may not work for that later. And gotta wait on money to catch up, pay for some of these other parts, so I can order an intercooler and a condenser and some other things. I'll probably wait for the condenser later. It's not a priority. I've also kind of decided I'm going to go to a dual pass. I could have bought a dual pass radiator and it would have already been set up. Kind of kicking myself in the ass for that one just a little bit, but you don't know till you know. So I'll put both inlet and outlet on the passenger side, and then I'll have a long hose going across. So instead of having that short little jump, it'll have plenty of room for vibration and things to not be slowly destroying itself. Most of the factory, the 2J stuff, a lot of them are like that. They come out the passenger side, well, I mean, some of them are Japanese, they come out the right side and go to the left side, cross over the front of the engine. So ours will do the same thing. I may just buy the other radiator. I think they have one that's already set up like that with the cap on the right side. I don't think it really matters where the cap is, so I might just suck it up. I mean, it's mine now. I've had it for too long, and I've already welded stuff to it, so it's mine. I'll probably just stick with it. We'll cut the tube off the one side, block it off, weld the tube back on the other side, and I think I want to run AN lines just because they're cool. And Autoplumb, some company sells some connectors you slide over. I could weld AN stuff to the radiator. I could weld bungs in to then thread fittings and have ANs too. I don't like when I tighten it up that I'm stressing on the radiator. I don't like that. I'd rather it just float. Well, they make these fittings that slide over the barbs, and they can rotate. They can do what they need to do. So you take two wrenches, tighten them up, and you're not loading up. The pressure's not applied to the radiator itself. So I like that. It converts it to AN really easily. I will have to weld bungs on the other two ends, on the inlet and outlet on the engine side. But I think that's where I want to go. The dual pass should be better. I don't see any downsides. I've read some things that say if you go dual pass or triple pass, you need a higher volume water pump to keep up with that because it puts more demand on the water pump and the cooling system. But I've also heard that the dual pass helps get rid of a lot of heat. So, whatever. It'll work. It's convenient this time. And I think that's what I'm going to do. All I got to do is cut a slit in one side, slide a piece of aluminum in that plugs it off from just going top to bottom, and weld that thing in. And then it has to go across, back down, and back over, and we're good to go. So, that's that. There's really no reason to have a radiator part 2. The continuity of this build has not been awesome. The funds and the time, the new baby, family stuff, everything else, I can't just stick to it the way I want, which is fine. That's life. But we'll keep ticking away at it. I made another video. I was going to make another video, but it was just so short. So here at the end of this, I'll show you what I've got my shifter bracket I made and how that worked out. Passenger side mount, done. Rock solid, we are good to go. I've still got a couple tweaks now that I changed so many things on this side. I've got a couple more tweaks, Some holes need adjusted just a little bit, but for the most part, this side bolted right in. On the other side, it's not together right now. I really can't show you a lot. On the other side, in my model, whenever I was measuring, I knew the offset I needed, but somehow between that and the computer, I got off by about 5/8 of an inch. So it didn't work. So I had to have new pieces laser cut, and there was some benefits. I was able to shorten it up a little bit and get it in the right spot, but gotta hit order, gotta wait. Even right now, they still weren't shipped, and I ordered them Monday. So next week sometime we'll have it, and hopefully that's done. Hopefully I hit the target and I can be done with engine mounts. The next problem we're gonna have is I designed up the transmission mount, but I designed it up in mind that I was gonna scoot the engine back a little bit. And now that I'm not, I've got to go back in the model, open it all up, and make one for the engine being 2 inches forward from the factory transmission mount. And this is all because I could rig it up, but I don't want to rig it up. I want to make sure I can sell a kit. This is everything you need to bolt this thing in as best as possible. So I think this turned out pretty good. It's starting to rust. I've still got these lower holes. I've got to move them just a touch, and I've got to add the hole of this back pad, and then this will be complete. Fix the driver's side. Hopefully, maybe they shipped it. I can check again. It'll be here tomorrow, but I doubt it, because sometimes it comes from, I think there's another one in Las Vegas or Nevada or something, somewhere way out there, and it takes another week to get here. Anyway, this one's good. This bolt's not in the hole because this used to be here. Once I moved the engine forward, it made more sense to grab this lower perch, and then once I had the turbo manifold on, the way the pipes swept down, it got really close to things. Had clearance, but it's going to get hot. It's going to cook things. So going from this pad to this pad, kept these a little straighter and moved it down a little further away from the exhaust. All good things. The only other thing I really got to show you right now is shifty worky. So the problem while doing the bell housing swap is, here's the AW4 bell housing. We got the holes for the bracket for the shifter. Well, that doesn't exist on the Toyota bell housing, or the 2J. Nothing there. So I whipped up a model and got it ordered, and then I missed by just a touch, and I wanted to be able to bolt just right on without having to touch it with a drill. I had to move a hole like 1/8 of an inch. Anyway, this one bolts right on. This is our shifter cable bracket. This is parts of the transmission bracket that's no longer going to work properly. But I got the shifter cable bracket right, bolted right on, no problems. And there it goes right there. I'll have to figure out where I can get a new end for this guy, or if I got to get a whole new thing, but this was already zip tied back together at some point. But it shifts now. That works, and I believe, no it won't, maybe. My drive shaft may actually fit back in now that I scooted the engine back over. I think I might go back in. I'm designing the transmission mount so that you can bolt it into a factory height cross member, but this one is very much clearly dropped, maybe not by a lot, but by a little bit. So I'm going to end up spacing mine up the transmission just a bit. I can take some of the angle out of it. They do the drop to help fix this issue, because as you lift it up, U-joint angle, all the angles get all out of whack, and it gets too much, and you start getting it to bind up, and you get vibrations, because essentially it's trying to tear itself apart. So drop transfer case, take some angle out of it. Us moving it forward was able to take a little bit of angle. I mean, we're talking about just a tiny bit of angle out, so it's beneficial to move it forward for that. but we're gonna go slip yoke eliminator or hack and tap some form or fashion so we can have a double cardon joint in the back, and that'll solve all those issues. But since we're doing that, we can pick the transmission back up just a bit and give us a little more room here. It will also, intake's not on right now, intake manifold, the lower part sits about right here and it clears right now, but if it went up a hair it would help just a little more clearance to sit in this pocket. And if it did that, there's a chance the brace on the inside, you wouldn't have to touch it at all. You can just leave the brace, dent it until you hit the brace, and rock on. So it's been a lot of trial and error, because gotta wait a week, try it again, oh, it didn't work. Wait a week, try it again, oh shit, didn't work. But that's where we're at right now. So, just wanted to share, I did make some progress. Shifter works now. We got half the engine mounts done, and now I've got more work to do on the computer to get the rest done. Well, the other one's just got to come in, get it welded up. I've just got to redesign the transmission mount again. But I've got a little bit of work that I did on the radiator. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in here now. And hopefully this is a good enough update for you. Trying to keep moving. It's just, it is what it is. Got to wait on stuff. Sometimes I make the wrong decision and it causes me to wait another week. But we'll keep at it. Thank you.